The day Mia Bennett said those two words, I forgot how to breathe. I had only been joking when I said it. At least, that was what I told myself. We were standing by the back fence between her parents' small farmhouse and my place, with the late summer sun falling over the grass. She had a basket of clean sheets at her feet, her dark hair tied back, her sleeves rolled to her elbows, and flour still dusted on one side of her dress from the bakery. I leaned on the fence post and said, "Whoever marries you will be lucky." I expected her to laugh. I expected her to shake her head and tell me to stop talking nonsense. Instead, Mia looked at me with soft, steady eyes and said, "I agree." For a second, the whole world went quiet. But I should start before that, because I was not the kind of man who noticed love quickly. I was the kind of man who worked too much, spoke too little, and only realized something mattered after it had already settled deep in my chest. My name is Ethan Walker. I was 29 then, running a small cattle ranch outside Pine Hollow, Montana. Pine Hollow was not much more than a main street, a feed store, a gas station, a church, and Rosie's Diner, where the coffee always tasted burnt but everyone drank it anyway. My ranch sat west of town, where the dirt road bent past cottonwood trees and open fields. I had an old white farmhouse, 38 head of cattle, a red truck that complained every cold morning, and more work than one man could finish in a day. My father had died when I was 19. My mother stayed with me as long as she could, keeping the house warm, cooking too much food, and reminding me that being alone was not the same as being strong. When she passed 5 years later, the house changed. It did not just get quiet, it became hollow. There were nights when I came in from the barn, kicked off my boots, and stood in the kitchen with my hat in my hands, listening to nothing. No voice asking if I had eaten. No soft humming from the stove. No one sitting at the table, waiting to hear about my day. I told myself I was fine. Men like me said that a lot. The Bennett family lived just across the creek. Thomas Bennett and his wife, Elaine, owned the little bakery on Main Street, and their daughter Mia worked with them almost every morning. I had known Mia for years. She was 25, kind without trying to prove it, and calm in a way that made people trust her. She baked bread before sunrise, helped her father with accounts in the afternoon, and still found time to take soup to old Mrs. Granger when her knees were bad. She remembered birthdays, carried extra food to neighbors, and somehow always knew when someone was too proud to ask for help. To me, for a long time, she was just Mia from across the creek. A good neighbor. A sweet woman. The kind of woman any man would be lucky to marry. I did not understand then that every time I thought that, my heart was trying to tell me something. That July, heavy rain washed out part of the fence between our places. On a Tuesday afternoon, I went out with wire, posts, and a hammer to fix it. The sky was clear after the storm, and the ground still smelled wet. The creek moved fast beside the cottonwoods, brown and restless from all that rain. I was driving a post into the soft earth when Mia came out behind her house carrying a basket of laundry. She set it beside the line, shook out a white sheet, and pinned it carefully in the wind. I looked away. Then I looked back. There was nothing fancy about what she was doing. It was just laundry, just a woman standing in sunlight, working with quiet hands. But something about the way she moved, slow and sure, made me stop. Her hair slipped loose near her cheek. She brushed it back with the back of her wrist, leaving a little streak of flour near her temple. For some reason, that small thing hit me harder than any pretty dress ever could. She looked up and saw me. "Ethan," she called. I rested one hand on the hammer. "Mia." "Creek got the fence again. Creek has no respect for good work." She smiled. "Maybe your good work needs deeper posts." I pointed at her with the hammer. "That sounded like your father talking." "It was. I borrow his wisdom when it helps me win." I laughed and she smiled wider, like she was pleased she had pulled it out of me. We talked for a few minutes about the rain, the cattle, the bakery, and how Mrs. Granger was doing. Simple things, neighbor things. Then she went back to the laundry and I went back to the fence. But after that day, I started noticing her everywhere. At the bakery, I noticed how she knew every customer by name. At church, I noticed how she always sat beside her mother and tucked her hand around Elaine's arm when the sermon got long. At the diner, I noticed how she laughed softly instead of loudly, like she kept some part of herself saved for people who truly listened. By the end of the month, Pine Hollow held its summer picnic behind the church. Everyone came. There were long tables full of food, children running through the grass, fiddle music from a small wooden stage, and men talking about cattle prices like the whole future depended on them. I stood near the lemonade table, pretending I was not watching Mia. She wore a pale yellow dress that day, nothing expensive, nothing meant to draw attention, but I could not stop looking at her. 3 men asked her to dance before sunset. I counted. That should have told me something. When the 3rd man held out his hand, she smiled politely and followed him toward the music. I felt something twist inside me. It was not anger. I had no right to be angry. It was worse than that. It was fear. Fear that someone else might see her clearly before I did. Mrs. Dawson, a widow who had known me since I was a boy, stepped beside me with a paper plate in her hand. "You know, Ethan," she said, "a man usually blinks when he's staring." I looked down at her. "I'm not staring." She took a bite of pie and looked straight at Mia. "Then you are doing a poor job of looking somewhere else." I had no answer for that. That night I walked home under a sky full of stars, slower than usual. The road was quiet, the fields dark on both sides. When I reached the bend near the creek, I stopped and looked toward the Bennett house. A light was on in the kitchen. I imagined Mia inside, helping her mother put dishes away, maybe laughing at something her father said. I imagined walking into a house like that and not feeling the emptiness I had carried for years. And for the first time, I let the thought come clearly. I wanted her. Not in a passing way. Not because she was pretty, though she was. I wanted her voice in my kitchen, her hand near mine at supper, her laughter in the rooms that had been quiet too long. I wanted to be the man who got to come home to Mia Bennett. That truth scared me so much, I almost turned away from it. I tried to sleep that night, but my mind kept walking back across the road to Mia Bennett. I lay in my room, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the old house settle around me. Outside, the cattle shifted in the pasture, and the wind moved against the window screen. Usually those sounds calmed me. That night, they only made the house feel bigger and emptier. I had known lonely before. I knew how to work through it, how to fill the day until my body was too tired to care. But wanting someone was different. Wanting Mia was not something I could fix with more fence posts or longer hours in the barn. The next morning I did what I always did. I got up before sunrise, fed the cattle, checked the troughs, and fixed a loose latch on the barn door. I told myself work would clear my head. It did not. By 9, I found a reason to drive into town for feed I did not really need yet. By 9:30, I was standing inside Bennett's bakery with the warm smell of bread, cinnamon, and coffee all around me. Mia was behind the counter, tying a paper bag with string. She looked up when the little bell over the door rang. "Morning, Ethan." Just hearing my name and her voice made me feel foolish. "Morning," I said. "Need a loaf of bread." She glanced at the shelves behind her. "Just one." One is usually how bread works. Her mouth curved. "You've never bought bread from us 3 times in 1 week before." I looked around like the answer might be written on the wall. Maybe I've grown to appreciate quality. Or maybe your oven broke. My oven works fine. Then I suppose it must be the quality. She wrapped a loaf and handed it over. Our fingers brushed for half a second, and I hated how much I noticed it. Her hand was warm from the bakery, soft with a little flour at the edge of her thumb. I paid, but I did not leave right away. Mia noticed. Was there something else? There were many things, too many. I wanted to ask if she had danced with those men at the picnic because she liked them. I wanted to ask if she ever looked toward my house at night the way I looked toward hers. I wanted to ask if I had already waited too long. Instead, I said, "How's Mrs. Granger?" Mia's face changed, softening with concern. "Her knees are worse this week. I'm taking soup to her this afternoon." "I can walk with you." She blinked, surprised. "You have work." "It'll wait." Ranch work does not usually wait. "It can today." She studied me for a moment, and I wondered if she could hear what I was really saying. Then she nodded. "All right, I'm leaving after lunch." I came back at 1, wearing a clean shirt like that made the whole thing less obvious. Mia was waiting outside the bakery with a basket on her arm. The afternoon sun touched her hair, and for a second, I forgot every normal thing a man should say. She looked at me and smiled. "Ready." "Ready." We walked down Main Street, then onto the dirt road that led toward Mrs. Granger's little house. It was not a long walk, but I remember every part of it. The sound of gravel under our shoes. The way Mia carried the basket with both hands when the road got uneven. The smell of dry grass and warm dust. Her shoulder close to mine, but not touching. She talked about the bakery first. A little boy had tried to trade 2 buttons for a cookie that morning. Her father had pretended to consider it seriously before giving the boy the cookie anyway. She laughed while telling me, and I found myself smiling before she even reached the end. Then she asked about the ranch, and I told her about a calf that kept escaping through the same weak spot in the fence. "You need deeper posts," she said. I looked at her. "You enjoy saying that." "I enjoy being right." "You get that from your father too." "No," she said, "that part is all mine." I laughed and she looked pleased again. At Mrs. Granger's house, Mia moved like she had been born to care for people. She warmed soup on the stove, checked the old woman's medicine, folded a blanket over the back of a chair, and opened the curtains to let in more light. Mrs. Granger watched her, then watched me. "You two came together?" she asked. Mia's cheeks turned pink. "Ethan was kind enough to walk with me." Mrs. Granger made a small sound. "Kind, is that what we call it now?" Mia looked down at the soup pot. I cleared my throat. I just wanted to help. The old woman pointed one thin finger at me. "Then help faster." I nearly dropped the firewood I was carrying. Mia turned away, but I saw her smile. On the walk back, the air between us felt different. We did not talk as much. The silence was not uncomfortable, but it was full. Every few steps, my hand brushed near hers, and each time I wondered if I should reach for it. I did not. I was brave with cattle, storms, broken gates, and hard work. But with Mia Bennett walking beside me, I became a man who could not move his fingers 2 inches. When we reached the bakery, she stopped by the back door. "Thank you for coming," she said. I liked it. "Walking with me to Mrs. Granger's?" "Yes." Her eyes stayed on mine. "You can do it again if you want." I nodded too fast. "I want." That was how it started. Small walks, short visits, a reason to stop at the bakery, a fence that suddenly needed checking every other day. I told myself I was moving carefully, but the truth was I was moving slowly because I was afraid. By late August, I was eating supper at the Bennett house once a week. Elaine Bennett always made too much food and acted like it was an accident. Thomas asked me about cattle, hay prices, and whether I had fixed the lower gate yet. Mia sat across from me under the kitchen light, smiling into her cup whenever her mother said something that embarrassed her. One evening after supper, Thomas and Elaine stayed inside while Mia walked me to the porch. The sky was deep blue and crickets were singing in the grass. "You know," she said, leaning one shoulder against the porch post, "my father likes you." "That is good, since he owns the porch I'm standing on." She laughed softly. "My mother likes you too." "And you?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Mia looked at me, and the laughter faded from her face, but not in a bad way. Her eyes became quiet. "I think you already know I like you, Ethan." My heart hit hard once. I wanted to answer. I wanted to step closer. But Thomas opened the door behind her and said, "Mia, your mother needs help with the dishes." The moment broke, but it did not disappear. A few days later, I saw her by the fence again. It was Tuesday afternoon, the same kind of clear day as before. She stood near the clothesline, hanging white towels that moved in the wind. The creek ran behind her, shining under the sun. I was on my side of the fence with a hammer in my hand, pretending to inspect a post I had already fixed twice. Mia saw me and smiled, "Checking your deep posts, making sure they remember their duty." She laughed and pinned another towel. We talked about Mrs. Granger, the bakery, the weather, the picnic, and nothing important. But everything felt important because it was her. Then there was a pause. She lifted a sheet from the basket and shook it open. The wind caught it for a second, wrapping sunlight around her. I looked at her standing there, kind and steady and beautiful without trying, and the words came out before fear could stop them. "You know, Mia," I said, "whoever marries you will be lucky." She went still. The sheet hung between her hands. Her face turned pink, but she did not look away. She looked straight at me across that old fence, like she had been waiting for me to finally say something close to the truth. Then she said very softly, "I agree." I stared at her. My mouth went dry. "You agree?" Mia lowered the sheet into the basket and stepped closer to the fence. "Yes," she said, "because I hope it's you." I stood there with one hand on the fence and the other still holding my hammer, looking at Mia Bennett like she had just changed the weather. "You hope it's me?" I asked. Her face was red now, but she did not step back. "Yes." I looked down at the grass, then back at her. "Mia, I don't want to misunderstand you." "You're not." The creek moved behind her, and the wind pushed one white towel against the line. I remember that because my mind was searching for anything normal to hold on to. But nothing felt normal anymore. The girl I had been too afraid to want had just told me she wanted me too. I set the hammer down slowly. "I meant what I said," I told her. "I didn't say it just to be kind." "I know," she said. "You're not very good at saying things you do mean." That made me smile, even though my chest felt tight. "Is that a compliment?" "It is from me." I leaned closer to the fence. "How long have you been hoping?" She looked toward the creek for a second before answering. "Since the picnic, maybe. Maybe before that. I think I noticed it before I admitted it to myself." I let out a quiet breath. "Then you were faster than me." "A little," she said. "Only a little." Her smile grew, maybe more than a little. For the first time in a long while, I laughed without feeling like I had to hold part of myself back. Mia laughed too, soft and nervous, and suddenly the fear inside me became something warmer. I wanted to reach across that fence and take her hand, but I did not. Not yet. Some moments deserve care. "Mia," I said, "I'd like to come speak to your father." She lowered her eyes, but I saw the smile she tried to hide. "About what?" "You know about what?" "I might need to hear you say it." I looked at her then, really looked at her. "About courting you properly." Her fingers tightened around the clothespin in her hand. "Then you should come tonight." "Tonight?" My father will be home by 6. My mother will make supper. She always makes too much when she knows you might come. I blinked. She knows. Mia tilted her head. Ethan, my mother knew before you did. That should have embarrassed me. It did, a little. But mostly it made me feel like I had been walking in the dark while everyone else could see daylight. That evening, I changed shirts 3 times before deciding every shirt I owned looked the same. I washed my hands twice, combed my hair, and stood in my kitchen feeling more nervous than I had ever felt before. Then I drove the short road to the Bennett house. Thomas Bennett was sitting on the porch when I arrived. That told me everything. Mia had spoken to him. Maybe Elaine too. Maybe the whole house had been waiting for me. Thomas was not an unkind man, but he had the kind of quiet face that made lying impossible. He nodded to the chair beside him. "Sit down, Ethan." I said. For a while neither of us spoke. The sky was turning orange over the pasture, and the smell of supper drifted through the open kitchen window. I could hear Elaine moving dishes inside. I could hear Mia's voice once, low and soft, and my heart answered like a fool. Finally I said, "Mr. Bennett, I'd like your permission to court Mia." Thomas kept his eyes on the fields. "Why now?" The question was calm, but it hit hard. I swallowed, because I finally saw what I should have seen sooner. He turned his head slowly. "And what is that?" "That Mia is not just kind, she is steady. She notices people. She works hard without needing praise. She makes a room feel warmer just by being in it." I paused because my voice had gone rough, and I don't want to spend the rest of my life pretending I only see her as my neighbor. Thomas watched me for a long time. Then he said, "Mia has a habit of taking care of people who forget to take care of her." I nodded. "I've noticed." Noticing is easy. Doing something about it is where most men fail. "I won't fail her." "I hope not." I waited, my hands tight on my knees. At last he looked back toward the sunset. "Supper is ready at 6 most nights. If you're courting my daughter, you can start by showing up when she expects you." I let out a breath. "Yes, sir." He stood and opened the door. "And Ethan?" "Yes. If you hurt her, I'll still be polite to you in church, but that is all." I nodded. "Fair." From that night on, I came to the Bennett house as more than a neighbor. At first it felt strange. I had sat at their table before, but now every glance from Mia meant something. Elaine smiled too much. Thomas pretended not to notice. Mia tried to look calm, but once when I complimented the bread, she dropped her fork. I did not let her forget that. "You handle hot ovens every day," I told her later on the porch, "but one compliment nearly takes you out." She folded her arms. "It was not the compliment, it was your face when you said it." What was wrong with my face? It was too serious. I have a serious face. You have a very dangerous, serious face. That made me laugh, and she smiled like she had won something. The weeks passed slowly and quickly at the same time. I walked her home from the bakery. She helped me with the ranch accounts because my numbers were a mess. I brought her wildflowers from the field, and she pressed them inside an old book. She taught me how to make apple pie one rainy afternoon, though my first crust came out thick enough to stop a door. Mia looked at it and said, "It has courage." That means it's bad. It means it tried. I loved her more after that. But the deeper I fell, the more fear followed me. One cold evening in October, I stopped halfway across the field on my way to her house. The windows glowed warm. I knew Mia would be inside. I knew she would look up when I entered. I knew Elaine would set a plate for me and Thomas would ask about the cattle. It was everything I wanted. And that was what scared me. Wanting something gave the world away to hurt you. For years I had lived carefully. I worked. I paid bills. I fixed what broke. I did not ask life for too much. But Mia made me want a full table, a warm house, a hand reaching for mine in the dark. I almost turned back. Then the front door opened. Mia stood there with her shawl around her shoulders. Ethan. I looked at her from across the yard. She stepped onto the porch. Are you coming in? Something in her voice told me she saw more than I wanted her to see. So I walked the rest of the way. When I reached the porch, she did not tease me. She only looked at me gently. You got quiet, she said. I got scared. Of what? I looked past her into the warm house. Of wanting this too much. Mia's eyes softened. She reached down and took my hand. It was the first time she had done that. Her fingers fit into mine like they had been waiting there. Then want it anyway, she said. That was when I knew. Not guessed, not hoped, knew. I asked Mia to marry me in November, by the same fence where everything had changed. The cottonwoods were yellow, and the air had the first bite of winter. I had carried my mother's ring in my pocket for 2 weeks, waiting for the perfect moment before I finally understood that the perfect moment was not fancy. It was honest. Mia stood near the clothesline with her shawl wrapped around her. I said her name, and when she turned, I took out the ring. Her hand flew to her mouth. I forgot every speech I had practiced. Mia, I said, I was slow, I know that, but I see you now. I see how you care for everyone. I see how you make ordinary days feel like they matter. I see the life I want, and you are in every part of it. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't want to be your neighbor across the creek anymore, I said. I want to be your husband. I want to build a home with you. I want to choose you every morning and every night for the rest of my life. I held out the ring. Mia Bennett, will you marry me? She looked at me through tears and smiled. Ethan Walker, she whispered, I agree. When Mia said yes, I did not move at first. I just stood there by the fence with my mother's ring in my hand, staring at the woman who had somehow become my whole future. The creek ran behind her. Yellow leaves moved over the grass. A cold wind touched my face, but all I felt was the warmth in my chest. You should probably put it on my finger, Mia said softly. I laughed, but my hands were shaking. I took her left hand and slipped the ring onto her finger. It was not a grand ring. It was simple, silver and old, with a small stone that caught the pale November light. But on Mia's hand it looked right, like it had been waiting for her long before either of us understood. She looked down at it for a long time. My mother wore that ring, I said. It was the only thing of hers I could give you. Mia lifted her eyes to mine. Then it is perfect. I stepped closer then, finally crossing the space I had been afraid of for months. She came toward me at the same time, and when I kissed her, it was not wild or rushed. It was quiet, deep, and full of every word I had been too slow to say. When we told her parents, Elaine cried before Mia even finished the sentence. Thomas stood near the kitchen stove with his arms folded, trying to look calm, but his eyes were wet. He walked over to Mia, took her hand, looked at the ring, then looked at me. You took your time, he said. I know, sir. He nodded, but you came right. That was all he said, but it meant more to me than a long speech. The news moved through Pine Hollow faster than a storm wind. By the next morning, Rosie at the diner already knew. The man at the feed store slapped the counter and said, Finally. Mrs. Dawson stopped me outside church and shook her head like she had personally carried me across the finish line. I told you, Ethan, she said. Yes, ma'am. You were staring. Yes, ma'am. Mia laughed so hard beside me that she had to hide her face against my arm. That winter was cold, hard, and beautiful. The ranch still needed work. Cattle still broke fences. Snow still piled against the barn doors. My hands cracked from the cold, and there were mornings when the water pump froze before sunrise. But everything felt different because Mia was in it now. She came over with her mother in January to see the house and decide what needed fixing before the wedding. I had been working on it quietly for weeks. I replaced broken boards in the kitchen, repaired the porch rail, painted the bedroom, and built shelves by the stove. But the thing I most wanted her to see was the new window. I had cut it into the east wall of the kitchen so morning light would fall across the table. I knew Mia got up early. I knew she liked quiet mornings, hot coffee, and the first pale light before the day became busy. So I built that window for her. When she walked into the kitchen, she stopped. Light poured over the table and touched the floorboards. Mia looked from the window to me. "You did this." "I did." "Why here?" I looked at her, suddenly shy. "Because I thought you should have good morning light." Her face changed. She did not cry, not exactly, but her eyes became bright. She walked over and took my hand. "You made room for me," she whispered. "I want the whole house to feel like yours too." She held my hand tighter. "It already does." We were married in April, behind the Bennett farmhouse, near the same fields where I had spent years pretending I was only a neighbor. It was not a fancy wedding. We had wooden chairs in the grass, wildflowers in jars, food brought by neighbors, and more pies than any town had a right to eat. The sky was bright after 3 days of rain, and everything smelled like new grass and wet earth. Mia wore a simple ivory dress her mother had made. Her hair was pinned back, with a few soft pieces loose near her face. When Thomas walked her toward me, my throat tightened so hard I could barely breathe. She was smiling. Not nervous, not unsure. She looked like she had always known she would reach me, even when I was too slow to understand. When I said my vows, I did not try to sound like a poet. I just told her the truth. I promised to see her every day, not only when she was kind, patient, and strong, but also when she was tired, when she needed help, when she needed someone to hold her instead of letting her carry everything alone. I promised I would never make her love me in silence. Mia's voice was soft when she made her vows. She said she had waited for me, but not because she wanted a perfect man. She wanted a steady one, a man who listened, a man who came back, a man who meant what he said, even if he took too long to say it. Then she smiled through her tears and said, "And when you told me whoever married me would be lucky, I knew you were finally close enough to the truth." Everyone laughed. I did too. Then she became my wife. That night we came home to the ranch, our house. Mia sat at the kitchen table with her hair down and both hands around a cup of tea. The east window was dark then, but the moonlight touched the glass. She looked around the room slowly. "What are you thinking?" I asked. She smiled. "I'm thinking this house does not feel lonely anymore." I reached across the table and took her hand. "It hasn't since you walked in." The years after that were not perfect. Real life never is. There were sick calves, bad storms, tight money, and long days when both of us were too tired to speak much. But even on hard days, I never felt alone again. Mia filled that house with bread, laughter, quiet songs, and the kind of love that did not need to be loud to be strong. She helped with the ranch books because she was better with numbers. I helped at the bakery when her father's back got bad. We built our life slowly, one ordinary day at a time. 3 years later, our son was born. We named him Thomas. 2 years after that, our daughter came, and Mia named her Grace because she said that was what our life had been given. One afternoon, years after the wedding, I was fixing that same fence by the creek when Mia came outside with a basket of laundry. Thomas ran ahead through the grass, and little Grace followed with serious steps, holding one of Mia's clothespins like it was treasure. Mia stood by the clothesline, sunlight in her hair, and for a moment I saw the girl from that first summer day again. She looked at me and smiled. "Do you remember what you said right here?" I leaned on the fence, that whoever married you would be lucky. She looked toward our children, then back at me. You were right. I shook my head. No, Mia, I was more than lucky. She came closer and I took her hand. I had almost missed her, not because she was far away, but because she had been right beside me the whole time, across the creek, in the bakery, at her parents' table, in every small kindness I had noticed too late. But love had waited for me there, patient and brave, until I finally found the courage to tell the truth. And the best part of my life began the day I joked, "Whoever marries you will be lucky." And Mia Bennett looked back at me and said, "I agree."